Barry, I have this sense that everything I see, feel is just unified into a single sense of personality, that I know I'm me. Yet I know we have all these different components. How does the senses consist of making this unity of personality?
So that's a very puzzling question, because here we are just now talking and we're clearly seeing one another, listening to the sounds of our voices, but we're also smelling the environment around us. We've got the feel of the position of our limbs and our bodies. And although all of these bits of information are telling us about the world and ourselves, it doesn't look to us, it doesn't feel to us as though they're coming in separate packets. There isn't, here's the hearing bit, here's the sound bit, here's the feel and the look. And yet we do still want to talk as though sound is very different from feel, smell from touch, and we want to treat these things as though they came in different sensory perspectives, different sensory parts. We know that that can't be right, both because we're conscious of having a single rich experience of the world, nothing seems to be too segregated, and at the same time we also know that the brain does an awful lot of crosstalk between the senses, that the senses cooperate and collaborate with each other. There may be no such thing as just hearing or just seeing. And I think for a very long time we've assumed that we could have these experiences in mono, as it were, without the interruption of the others. But we're now beginning to believe that's not true.
So there is really the brain has this what we call the binding problem with taking all these different senses and giving us the illusion of unity?
It's whether it gives us the illusion of unity or whether unity is actually a very good thing. So if you're getting the sound of my voice and also seeing my lips move, then you're getting two sources of information about what I'm conveying to you. Now, it may be that treating two sources of information as a way of locking onto a single thing is very good, because that's giving you more clues about what's going on in the environment. So the unity might not be an illusion, it might actually give you real information about what's the source of that sound, where are the sounds coming from. Now, I can illustrate this. I mean, when you're in the cinema, you think that the sounds are coming out of actors' mouths. Of course, that's not where the sound is coming from
the
at all.
loudspeakers.
Yeah, it's coming from the loudspeakers. They might be at the side of the movie theater. They might be behind you, under your seat. And yet, when you're getting simultaneous movement of the lips and corresponding sounds, you get the visual capture of auditory attention. You suddenly start to think it's coming from there. Now, that way of locking onto a single source is important, because we try to keep track of people as the sources of speech. Now, another way in which...
and when they're desynchronized even a little bit, we're totally disoriented.
Well, what's very interesting is as soon as that synchrony is lost, the illusion goes that you think that's not where the sounds are coming from. But if you allow a little delay to persist, eventually the brain puts them together again. You can overcome that lack of synchrony as long as the gap or the lag is something you've got used to. Here's another thing where you see cooperation. So when I'm hearing your voice and looking at your face, I'm getting two sources of information of you. Now, those two sources of information are actually dealt with in very closely related parts of the brain. You've got the fusiform gyrus, and you've got part of it that we call the fusiform face area to recognize faces, which we do distinctively. These are very important aspects of the environment of face. But it turns out that very close by, there's the part that recognizes voice. Now, when you hear a voice over the telephone, when you don't see somebody, it activates your face recognition area. In other words, involuntarily, you can't help imagining what somebody looks like when you're hearing them speak. So now we've got two ways of locking onto a person. And it's good that these two ways cooperate, because there might be people who look like you but don't sound like you out there, and there might be people who sound like you and don't look like you. But it's very unlikely there's somebody who looks and sounds just like you. So this is almost like having a sensory fingerprint of you. It's having something uniquely good at identifying you.
We typically think of 5 senses that we have, but when you really see what's happening in each of those individual senses, many of them can be disaggregated, and it's really hard to tell how many different separate modules we have. What are some of the latest thinking about this?
Well, it's interesting. Yeah, you ask the ordinary person how many senses do we have, and they say 5. Why 5? Sure. I mean, why just 5? I mean, as soon as you tell them, well, haven't you got a sense of balance? Don't you feel whether you're going sideways or up or down in a lift? Yes, of course, that looks like a sense. So we have these beautiful auditory canals in the vestibular system, these sort of three-way flows of fluid that tell us where we're moving. You've also got proprioception. If you close your eyes right now, you know where your limbs are, exactly. And kinesthesia, you can feel your limbs moving. Now, if you ask neuroscientists how many senses do we have, they'll say, well, still in dispute, somewhere between 22 and 33. So there's a huge disparity between what the folk say and what we're learning. Now, some of the cases where we think it's a single sense turn out to be far from it. So take one of the five senses, our sense of taste. Now, most people think that's a single sense, and when they're eating something, they pop something in their mouth and chew it and swallow, or they take a sip of some liquid. They think they're getting all that from the tongue. In fact, they're getting very little of it from the tongue. What we call taste is always a collaboration of taste, touch, and smell. There's a feel of something in your mouth, whether it's creamy, whether it's crunchy, whether it's smooth or soft. You also have a large contribution from smell. So remember, on the tongue itself, the taste buds give us salt, sweet, sour, bitter, savory, maybe metallic, some dispute about whether we have fat receptors. But we don't have receptors for strawberry or pineapple or mint or or cinnamon. This is coming from smell. And a large part of what we also experience in taste comes from something called the trigeminal nerve, the facial nerve. Now, the facial nerve is the thing which, when irritated by eating too much mustard, gives you this pain at the bridge of your nose. And of course, mustard can feel hot in the mouth. Peppermint can feel cool. But of course, there's no difference in temperature at all. So when you have all of these things collaborating, taste, touch, smell, trigeminal nerve, they're giving you something which appears to you to be a single experience. And I think because it's unified and singular, which we call flavor, then people think, oh, that's coming from a single sense. Not at all. Now, you need a collaboration of senses to produce that single unified experience. And it turns out that what's going on, the multisensory integration of different sensory inputs, that's not the exception, that's the rule. That's largely how most of our senses are working.
So what's happening is that just by a few of these modalities and different combinations of each, you can produce an almost unlimited number of flavors.
You can. I mean, you're getting richness from the diversity of inputs. And most of the things we think of as single, think of the taste of menthol. What is menthol? It's a bitter taste, a minty aroma, and a cool feeling in the mouth. So right there, you've got all of these three components making up something that's treated as singular. So flavor, I think, is interesting because flavor turns out to be something we're very familiar with. We feel we know it, but actually we don't recognize just how complex it is.
So it seems like there are two orders of magnitude here in which we have this conscious experience. On the one hand, we have the elements of flavor that build into it. And then you have flavor, which is a composite already of these categories. And then you have flavor being one of the experiences that we have that build our unity. So then flavor and other kinds of things build into the unity that I feel in consciousness. So you have, in essence, several layers that build up into this experience that we have.
Several layers. And of course, you've got collaborations from the emotional system too, because most of the things we eat have a hedonic valence for us. In fact, that's probably why we eat, is because it's nice or it's nasty. I mean, we're very seldom neutral about things that we eat or drink. We like them, we don't like them. And often that hedonic element blinds us to the experience's real content. I give you a glass of wine and I say, what do you think of it? And you'll say, oh, I like it. And I want to say, I didn't ask you that. What do you think of it?
Yeah.
So tell me what it tastes of. Yeah. So notice that we get all this information coming in and then immediately throw it away because the real value for us is how good was that experience. So if we think of all these things that are taking place, you've got the senses feeding in to create a single unified experience, say, of the flavor of some food. And on top of that, we've got how we feel about it, whether we like it or not, whether it attracts us. So we've got this hedonic element. So you've got emotions, perceptions, fusing together, probably memory, probably expectations. And when you put all of that together, it's an enormously complex system that's providing something that strikes us as a unified whole.